evening, everybody. Welcome to our December program of Squirrel Hill Historical Society. There is no Zoom tonight, so we had a little problem. But if you know somebody that wanted to watch it, they can go to our website after we upload it and see it there. So things do happen. Anyway, I'm president of Squirrel Hill, Jim Hammond, and we have program is recorded and will be uploaded. Okay, our membership drive continues. Actually, you're a member from January 1st to December 31st. And then if the sign up now, of course, you automatically are good through December 31st. And I'd like to thank all of our board members. We've had a very interesting year getting all this Zoom and all the new programs together, and having a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're working on it. So it's going to be nothing but better. And tonight we have our board members. We got Helen Wilson is here tonight. She's our VP, newspaper editor, researcher. She's sitting back. Tony's back there also. Navina, another one of our email coordinators, researcher, and also the president of the Neil Log House. And you can see that it's coming along quite well if you go there and drive by and take a look. There are a lot of things going on there. It really looks good, Tony. We have Todd Miller. He's back. He's our program coordinator, and Toby Chapman.
Not here tonight.
Not here tonight. Okay. And then we have Stanley Klein. He's not here. He's our membership coordinator. Evelyn Young is our longtime treasurer.
She's not here.
She's not here. Probably traveling, huh?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. Audrey Glitman, back here on the camera. He's our media specialist, and she's the one that uploads everything, so if something goes wrong, call her. Wayne Bostinger, he's not here tonight. He's also a researcher. Todd Wilson, he's gone tonight. He's an Instagram coordinator, also a researcher. And Charles Seacop, he's not here tonight. He does the city archives, and he's got that digital collection on the website, and it's all in our newsletter. And Jean Binstock, she is just moved, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Now tonight, if anybody is not a member and would like to see one of our newsletters, we have them on the back table. And if you want to become a member, you'll find out why this is so good. And this is really worth the $15 a year or $25 for a couple. So if you want one of these, just go to the back table and grab one. So I guess that's about all I have right now. Todd Miller is going to introduce our speakers tonight and give us a little update on what's going on in our programming. I'm glad everybody came that's here, because you'll be able to get everything firsthand.
Thanks, Jim, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Our program this evening is Writing and Illustrating America and the Holocaust. And we're pleased to have Dr. Barbara Burstin and her illustrator partner, Fred Carlson, with us. Dr. Burstin is a lecturer in history at the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University, and a longtime Squirrel Hill Historical Society member. And Fred is an award-winning professional illustrator. He's been in Pittsburgh since 1980, and they will discuss how they collaborated to produce a 30-page booklet that it's on the back table, and some of you have. If you want to hold up a copy, if you have one in the audience there. It's about America's response to the rise of Hitler and the occurrence of the Holocaust. We'll consider how these chapters in history continue to affect contemporary life. And then following the presentation, if you don't have a copy of the book, you can buy one for $10 on the table in the back. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Barbara Burstin and Fred Carlson.
Okay. Nice to see so many people who we know and people who we don't know. This is not going to be an evening of talking about America's response to the Holocaust. That's a whole subject in and of itself, and it's a semester course, and we're not doing that tonight. But what I thought would be a really interesting presentation would be for me to kind of give you some idea of what my thoughts were in writing this, and then turn it over to Fred, who I was lucky enough to find as an illustrator to put the text to pictures. And my goal in even writing this, I teach on the college level, which is great, I love it, but I realized that a lot of young people in high school and even junior high know nothing about the Holocaust, or certainly nothing about America's connection to the Holocaust. And it's a chapter in US history as well as world history that needs to be told. And there are many lessons that come out of the study of this material. Certainly anti-Semitism is an ongoing one. I don't have to tell you how it's long-standing and pervasive. The issue of demagoguery. Hitler and Roosevelt came to power within 5 weeks of one another. So that's a fascinating juxtaposition that Fred will talk about how he illustrated it. But when you think about it, within 5 weeks of one another in 1933, and how one man took his power to genocide, destruction, war, and the other man virtually saved our democracy in very similar circumstances of depression and insecurity and so forth. So there's that challenge of trying to understand what happened in both situations and how an entire civilized modern people were hoodwinked and just captivated by this demagogue who made promises, and the fragility of democracy. I mean, this is certainly something that's relevant. And just issues of immigration, of refugees, of press coverage, what people knew, what the truth was. These are issues that are very relevant today, and this graphic booklet deals with it. And the reason that I wanted to do this graphic booklet is because that's where the young people are today. I don't know about you, but I find in classes that young people are not reading books. They're not reading that much. They're victims of social media. They have to have a quick their information via the screen and so forth. So I felt that this was a way to try to reach young people by using, it's a comic book, but I won't call it a comic book. I have to call it a graphic booklet, because what the topic is not a comic book. So that was what I wanted to do, and also in writing this, I wanted to have it so that two teenagers would be discussing the events as they unfolded. So, and I had, and Fred, you will tell us, I wanted a black young man, an African American, and a white woman, and a white girl, and to kind of make this, bring in issues of racism as well as anti-Semitism and so forth. So they are discussing things as they occur. So I think, Fred, why don't you kind of go through some of your illustrations and how you do it, because really I want him to do the talking to you.
Barbara, thank you. It was quite a privilege to get to know Barbara, work with her on this project. She dealt with the issue of why we went with the graphic booklet format because of, quote, reluctant readers. That's that's what we're facing in our society today, is that young people are not reading books. I mean, when I did my own amateur history, teaching myself when I was in my 20s about this historic debacle, I went to the library and read books, and there weren't a lot of pictures. And if you read Victor Hilberg's book, The Destruction of the European Jews, who's read that book, by the way, besides Barbara and myself? Some of you, yes. The unfolding of the reality of it was clear, and I've just harbored lessons from my own study about this time period. And when Barbara called me about doing this job, I just couldn't believe it was dropping in on my studio at this time.
You know what? I didn't know Fred, okay? I call up the American Illustration, what's it?
Pittsburgh Illustrators.
Pittsburgh Illustrators, because Tim Manise, who I met through some book I did on Sophie Maslow, Tim was great, and he recommended that I call this Illustrated Society. So I get on the phone, and I say, well, I've got this booklet that I'm doing on a Holocaust. Do you know anybody? Fred happens to answer the phone, and he says, well, yeah, this guy. But kind of, you relay what happened.
Yeah, there's a couple of officers in the Pittsburgh Society of Illustrators. We get the phone calls that come if somebody has questions about our website. We have 130 incredible full members whose work is on the website. But the president and the treasurer, who's me, we get the phone calls of questions. So Tim recommended PSI to Barbara. She called me, and I don't want to be accused of poaching jobs off the website because I'm first call, you know, so I don't want to hoard things. You know, PSI members believe that what's good for everybody in the group helps everybody, because not everybody does the same work by any means. So I suggested 3 or 4 people, and I said I would be interested too. But Barbara thought about it, and she called me back and said, I want to use you. So she prepared her script. It was kind of like a movie script.
He's very modest. He's very modest. He didn't say anything that he wanted to do it, okay? He suggested this one, and then he suggested this one, and he really expressed his passion for this subject. And finally I said, you know what? How about you? And he said, okay.
Well, okay. And as she described it, I got her first script, and I realized, okay, the script is going to be brought, it's got to be storyboarded because you have these high school kids talking about the events, and it has to also blend in with the huge narrative scope of the invasions and the things Hitler did within Germany before he invaded any other country. There was a period between 33 and 38 where he just consolidated, parallel Hitler parts of government that overrode the old German government. And then in 38 he marches into Austria and the Sudetenland, and we're going to start talking about the narrative flow as we move ahead. First of all,
We're ad-libbing tonight. Okay.
first of all, and I'm gonna be marking, just like situation comedy actors. I've got my mark, and we've got Audrey, archiving this. So this is the artwork for the cover, and the cover was meant to show the contrast between this martial, huge military presence and the persecuted little kids that they had behind barbed wire, and just showing that contrast. And as we go along, and I'll get a little nerdy with some of the technical aspects of actually executing the illustrations, if this gentleman would hold up the cover, you'll see that there's color dropped in to areas that are white, and I'll talk about that briefly toward the end of the program. So some of the originals I'm showing have white spaces, and that's after I got all the artwork scanned, then we dropped in the text, and we also, I dropped in digital color to have nice flat graphic spaces that would help tell the story.
You can see the extensive artwork here. I mean, this is really an amazing project.
So in this case, I wanted to kick off the series by contrasting FDR and Hitler in the initial splash page. So Barbara's text is utilized. I had to design some text into boxes, which was narrative, and some text into word balloons, which were spoken by the characters, and use other graphic devices to like highlight a question. How will each man lead his people? You know, so that's a big question. And one of the striking things about the way the book was scripted by Barbara and how it came out, I believe, is the use of these two young high school kids who are raising the same ethical issues that kids today need to be aware of. So the kids reading this book are not only going to be informed about the scope of the war and the hideousness of the persecution of the Jews in Europe, but they're going to also have these questions raised right in front of them, you know, that they can talk about themselves. And the purpose of the book, it's like an easy book to use in a classroom. Every group of 4 kids around a table could have a copy of this and just answer the questions that the 2 kids are talking about. And so they're talking about things that are 90 to 75 years ago. However, they're contemporary kids. And this is part of the nature of this book, is that it resonates down through all this time period, that they're going to be educated about those 12 years, they're going to learn more about it, and they're also going to question aspects of prejudice, anti-Semitism, racism in their own society, demagoguing, you know, where you get your news, this kind of thing. And so there's the splash. And then we get into page 3, and there's things that are going on in Germany. Hitler's doing his speeches.
Talk about where you got all the illustrations.
Absolutely. After I storyboarded roughly the 32 pages, and I figured out, okay, this is the story we want to tell on this page, and this is how the kids' faces are going to be used to discuss the issue. It's important with a book like this to hold the attention of the reader and be historically accurate. So I knew from my 43 years in the business and my own personal interest in this subject matter, I knew where to go to find references. A lot of them I already had in my head, and I just had to find the right photo references to use, to draw from. And then things like the kids, I hired 2 Gateway High School track and field students who were seniors to be my models, and I took 60 shots of each of them they were saying the script. So I wanted their emotional content of their expressing the ethical issues in the book to be ringing true in their faces. So I had them read each line 3 times, you know, to kind of warm up their face. I said, say it again. And what do you think about this? You know, so we have a lot of great expressions going on in the book, and you'll see later when we get into Q&A and we can mingle, you'll see the more detail. But I probably had about 80 political portraits to do for this, and then about 70 of persecuted people.
You know what, why don't I hold this?
Okay.
Like that. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of go around.
Yeah, okay. So we have some of the piece archived on Audrey's camera, and then Barbara will bring it around. And the next few pages talk about inner dynamics in Germany, which were complicated. And these kids are reading about it. So they're kind of like time travelers. They're contemporary, yet they're reading the events as if they were just happening. So we're taking the reader on a time travel trip to stress the fact that the issues are just as clear today and need a response from our next generation. They can't just sit there and pretend that things didn't happen or plead ignorance to this stuff.
Like, for instance, let me give you an example. We have one of the young people saying, I don't understand. Don't the German people realize that Hitler has undermined their republic? People are losing their freedom of speech and basic rights. Once you start picking on one group, they could be next. And then the other kid responds, you make a good point, I wish people would stand up to his bullying. He's going to keep picking on anybody who isn't loyal to him until he stopped. And then the economic situation is pretty bad with nearly 1 out of 4 people out of work there and here. And then he asks, can someone like Hitler come to power in our country? Okay, so that's kind of where we leave this text on the bottom. But you can see that, at the top, yes, the Depression has been scared about the future, so they're listening to Hitler when times are tough. People are susceptible to someone who appeals to their emotions and prejudices. He's a demagogue, okay? And getting kids to think about what was going on in Germany and whether it's indeed relevant to anything here in America. Clearly I had I had things in mind that I wanted the kids to think about, but not mentioning any names, obviously.
So, and then page 4 is handed off from the issues here.
Can I pass this around?
Absolutely, absolutely. This one involves Sinclair Lewis's play. It Can't Happen Here. It also involves Henry Ford's anti-Semitism in Michigan. You have the biggest employer in the country who was, writing ridiculous things. And so these are all things that are happening in this country. So we start unfolding the aspect of what was happening in America. And we know now that Hitler used racism in this country as a buttress against our accusations against him. He said, well, what are you accusing me of when you're doing the same thing to your folks in the South, And there's a panel here where I have POWs, who German POWs in a train, and they were allowed to sit in the front, and the black soldiers who were guarding them had to stay in the back. And there's, Barbara brought in that whole aspect of the double victory.
Yeah, let me take this page, for instance. This page is number 3, and Sinclair Lewis, maybe some of you have heard that writer. Sinclair Lewis wrote a book, It Can't Happen Here, and of course the plot was that it can happen here in America in the 1930s. And I talk about Henry Ford. Okay, kids are shocked about that Henry Ford was this raving anti-Semite. And of course, Fred has drawn a picture of him, and I bet Hitler really likes Henry Ford. My Jewish friends are worried about the future, okay? And they, so we keep bringing this back to them, what's happening, the events, and then them thinking about it while we're describing the narrative then. And then one of the kids says, Ford might make good cars, but he's an anti-Semite. And then I have the kids talking here, and you can see what Fred was talking about, their faces. The kids are really, he's captured their emotions on these pictures here. They're really talking, and he launched a one-day boycott. I think Americans should protest that this is not the right way to treat your own citizens, she says. And the other person says, well, hold on there. Do you think we should be telling another country what to do or not to do with its own citizens? Is that our responsibility? So you're getting them to think about what is the responsibility of the United States as a major power. Should it be our responsibility to complain and criticize another country for what they're doing to their own citizens? So that's an example of setting up a discussion where young people can begin to think about using this history, this historical example, as a discussion piece.
Right.
So let me pass that around.
If you're, a lot of the current college problem is they've been indoctrinated into cultural relativism, where every culture is equal and everybody has a right to do whatever they want, and so there is no ethical, moral high ground on which to stand. And those kids are just exploring it right there by saying, how can our country tell Germany what to do? Well, we obviously didn't. we didn't.
And here, going on from that page, perhaps, but now that I think about it, if we complain about what Hitler is doing to the Jews, he might point out how badly we have treated, and still are treating, black people in this country, says the young lady. And then the black teenager says, you're telling me there's way too much racism and discrimination in this country. So again, bringing it, so it's not just Jews that we're dealing with, we're also talking about racism as well in America. So, and then talking about that we have to act and so forth, and then we go to 1935, the Nuremberg laws, and these Nuremberg laws are like a social death because Jews cannot marry or have any kind of relationship with non-Jews. That's crazy, he says, that laws can be so unfair. It shows that just because something is a law doesn't make it right. Okay, clearly we're discussing that, and then Fred has shown these pictures of the court system enforcing the Nuremberg laws and so forth.
Oh, tremendous.
He's got here how did Jewish parents, and then the black young man is saying, how did Jewish parents explain to their kids what's happening? I'm sure Jewish kids have no idea why they are being bullied in school and losing their friends. It makes no sense. Okay.
Yes, and as we move on, then the Olympics become front and center in 1936, and this was actually the movie with Jason Sudeikis as the coach of Jesse Owens was really good, I thought, to show what was going on. Some of the intrigue that went on with Avery Brundage agreeing that the Germans could host and that we would actually go. And so the young people here are talking about the same issues that they talked about in the 30s. And we talked about in 1980 when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, and we said, oh, we're not going to the Olympics. And then in '84, there was the bounce back boycott, where other countries didn't come because we were hosting in LA. So this has been a political football.
So let me just explain about the Olympics here. And the debate, should we go or shouldn't we go to the Olympics? The kids are discussing that. And I wanted to put in, I don't know how many of you know that one of the Olympic gold medalists was a African-American from Connellsville, John Woodruff. Some of you know that. University of Pittsburgh, but he won a gold medal at the 1936 Olympics, but he was not allowed to participate on the Pitt football team because he was black. And several years ago, well, it was, I guess, quite some time ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was at a Pitt football game, and a man was brought out in a wheelchair, and it was John Woodruff. He was, 1 year later, he was gone, and Mark Nordenberg made a public apology to John Woodruff on behalf of the University of Pittsburgh, because what had happened was that, first of all, as I said, he couldn't play on the football team, which sounds bizarre to us today, but there was an athletic meet in South Carolina, and NYU was invited and Pitt was invited, but they told us that John Woodruff would have to stay in separate facilities because of segregation. NYU did not go as a protest against segregation. Pitt went. And John Woodruff was furious at the University of Pittsburgh for this acceptance, this collaboration in a sense with Southern racial laws. And Mark Nordenberg publicly apologized to Woodruff a year before he passed away. So it's really very interesting. I don't go into it here. I talk about it in my classes. You know, but this is all stuff about the Olympics here, which is fascinating stuff. And Fred has illustrated that. Of course, Jesse Owens with his gold medals. Do you have some gold medals there? You do have some slipped in there.
Yeah, that was his USA emblem that was worn on their shirts.
And what's remarkable is the material that he's gotten. So let me pass that around.
Yeah, let me, the question about reference is, you know, can bounce around. We're now approaching the middle of the book, and we've got Roosevelt trying to do something, bringing in different countries at the Evian conference, trying to find a solution to get the Jews out of these countries. And I just I'll show you some of the reference at the end of the presentation, but I knew where to go for the persecuted people, I knew where to go for the political portraits, I knew where to go for the warfare scenes, and then there's a lot of background that I had to find, like landscapes, and I wanted to be true, and some newspaper headlines that the characters are reading, I wanted to find the actual headlines as they were being printed back then. So there's a lot of nuance, but after the first 3 months of going back and forth with the script and with the reference, I was ready to start drawing.
61C, we were regularly meeting there. Let me just mention here that I'm also very cognizant, and we might want to discuss it here, of the role Roosevelt played. Because particularly in the Jewish community, there's been a lot of criticism of Roosevelt. Not at the time. At the time, he was seen as, thank God for Roosevelt, because his programs helped the underdog, of which Jews were, and he stood up to anti-Semites. And so at the time, Roosevelt was really seen as a tremendous, wonderful president. But subsequently, in the 1980s and 1990s, there's been a lot of criticism of Roosevelt. And in fact, I remember I was once giving a lecture and kind of putting Roosevelt in context, which I like to do. This man had tremendous pressure on him, and from all sides. And a gentleman from the back stood up and started screaming at me, "How can you be so nice to Roosevelt?" And I'll never forget that. You know, everybody in the audience turned around. It was quite a dramatic moment. And so I'm very cognizant of how people look at Roosevelt. And so I say, I'm really glad that our president made an effort to help the refugees. But what happened? And then the girl says, well, nothing really. Most countries did not want refugees, especially Jews. So this is part of, and there's more that I go on, part of putting Roosevelt, the good stuff and the not so good stuff, because nothing is black and white. He certainly had his challenges, but tried. So that's part of it. And then I talk about there's a lot of anti-Semitism in other countries as well as America. So this is what, and you have various illustrations here. So this is part of that. How are we doing here?
This one, now we're starting to get into some violence. Kristallnacht is pictured in the lower right, and the way the Nazis were able to print their propaganda and send it over, and it was handed out at big events. The Bund,
Yeah,
you
the
know,
German.
Hitler speaks, and the Bund debates.
This is and you were able to get the actual newspaper articles. The German-American Bund was here in Pittsburgh on the north side. Some of you, what's the name of the German-American club? The Manicourt, yeah. And that's where the German-American Bund met. And what most people don't know is how prevalent this organization was, not just in Pittsburgh, but around the country. There were more than 60 chapters around the country. And the material that they passed out in Pittsburgh and in other cities, and I have students look at the different cities to see where they came from, whether any of this was distributed. It actually was published in Germany. It was propaganda by Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda in Germany. It was shipped to this country and distributed in this country. Congressmen, a number of congressmen were Nazi sympathizers and used the privilege of franking, sending out all this stuff free to their constituents. It is really a very disturbing reality how many Nazi sympathizers there were in this country, and how, of course, this is a free country, free speech, they had the right to do that, but it was really a big effort in this country, and Fred has illustrated that, and then the young people are talking about it. About prejudice, and they blame the Jews for the worldwide depression and the rise of the communists. They say that Jews are out to destroy Christianity and that they killed Jesus Christ. But that's ridiculous, the other young man says. I know, she says, but too many people get misinformation or are attracted to conspiracy theories, or don't let any facts interfere with their prejudices. I mean, I think some of this is really too relevant, this kind of material, okay? And the kids are talking about it, and they go on to talk about it. I know people who are prejudiced against either black, Jewish, or Asian people, or all of them together. They think they're better than them, but what they really are just bigoted or ignorant bullies. Okay, so this is stuff that the kids are talking about, and Fred has captured their expression as they engage in this conversation.
That's right. It was important for the narrative flow that the two kids continue to be living portraits and not just, you know, kind of like clutch cargo, simple faces with mouths that move. They really had to be drawn well. And now we start getting into Churchill standing up to the Nazis and trying to get FDR to be a part of the efforts. And so Churchill gets introduced now because it's getting to be 1940, and Churchill probably dominates the next couple of pages. Also, some of the congressmen and senators that were helping FDR are featured here, and they start, you know, every time they saw a break, maybe something would break, we'd be able to get more immigration to this country, and then something would shut down. The anti-immigration movement in the late 20s through the 30s, 40s, 50s, frankly, it was a long period where immigration was, you know, very, very low. And it was, of course, terrible during when people really needed it the most to get out of there and get here. And so we're starting to get into some of those stories too, and the story of the St. Louis comes up on the next page.
Well, no, actually, I think we missed that. I think that was early. Was that?
No, it's right there, it's the next one.
Okay. That's better than I do.
You can get lost in the
Yeah,
sludge.
yeah, okay, so this page, now this is page 8, I think we've had page 7, I think.
Yeah.
page 7
That's
is
right
that?
here.
Okay, so that's there, okay, so this page now is about how the nation is a lot of isolationists, we don't want to get involved, and Churchill, of course, as most of you know, he's screaming throughout the 1930s that we have to stand up to Hitler, that the policy of appeasement is totally ridiculous, that he has to be stopped. And so now we introduce Churchill, and I write here, well, we haven't protested up to now. Hitler has violated the Versailles Treaty, has taken over Austria, the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia, and Britain and France are still appeasing Hitler, this young man says. And then the student says, well, I don't really think we can ignore what goes on in the world. I don't think that that's how America's world power should behave. And then she gets into an argument, or, well, maybe Roosevelt will do something. I'm afraid things will get worse. And do you think he might actually want to kill people? Their conversation goes. And then here, Fred has introduced Senator Robert Wagner of New York and Congressman Edith Rogers of Massachusetts. The Wagner-Rogers Act, which was an act to try and bring children into the United States, and it doesn't even make it out of committee because the isolationists don't want our involvement, and of course the blatant anti-Semitism. Okay, we don't want these Jewish kids coming here, and it's very blatant, and the kids are talking about it. Okay, and we should try, and the kids say we should try and rescue them, but we're not doing it.
As we move ahead, everybody or most of us know the story of the St. Louis, which was out of Hamburg, I believe, and it tried to dock in New York and it went down to Cuba and it kept
Oh, it's
getting.
going to Cuba.
It was going to Cuba, wherever the places they thought they could disembark, they couldn't. And Miami was another place.
Yeah, I mean, this is all, he's got all this illustration here that these people, these over 900 Jews had visas to get to the United States, but they couldn't get in immediately because we have the quota system that goes back to the 1920s, which was something that we talked about in an earlier page. We had legislation that was passed in 1924 that blatantly discriminated against immigrants, particularly from Eastern and Southern Europe. And even Germany, the quota was only 27,000 per year, and there are 500,000 Jews in Germany, plus many non-Jews who want to get out. So our immigration was very restricted. The St. Louis, of course, they deny them entry into Cuba, and the captain of the ship, who was a devout anti-Nazi, is determined not to bring these people back to Germany, and he docks outside of the Miami harbor, and the telegraphs are going back and forth to Roosevelt and no response, and the ship ultimately leaves the Miami harbor, and Belgium and Holland and France and England agree to take the refugees, so they do not go back to Germany. But the discussion, what should be the U.S. policy? Okay, and the kids talk about that. Shouldn't we take them? They're right here, and so forth. So this is all illustrated in this book, in this page.
Thanks. Great.
Did I get the?
Let's, so you'll see as you come up and look at some of these other ones, there's more Churchill and all this, the Warsaw Ghetto. I'd like to show this page. This is a tragic page. And of course, it's about Operation Barbarossa, where Hitler decides to invade Russia. He takes the Einsatzgruppen killed 1.5 million Jews in their 3 or 4 months of trying to get to Moscow with 6,000 people with machine guns. And this is something that
I'm going to
This-
pass this
yeah.
because, again, the kids' faces when they're learning this is really extraordinary.
And, you know, this is another point of the narrative flow is, this is before death camps and this kind of thing, which is the popular, you know, everybody remembers that this was going on in Auschwitz. But this was a military move that had no military application. You know, it was, okay, if you're gonna go to Moscow and beat Stalin, you know, you've got 4 different sets of people that are roaming the countryside just murdering civilians. And that was all part of the, you know, what they wanted to do. And they won the territory, so nobody could stop them. And that's the thing about when you look back on the 12 years of here, and when the kids ask, how could he do it? Well, it's because he's a bully and he conquered all this geography, and we could not get strategic defenses in there to blow up, you know, camps and this kind of thing.
Let me
yeah.
just mention, there was a process of destruction, as many of you know. Once the war started, Jews were put into ghettos, which were themselves death traps. No exit, no entrance without permission by the Gestapo. Jews were allotted 184 calories a day. So if they didn't smuggle in food, they would have died within a few years anyway. That was the first process, but the Einsatzgruppen was the second step in this process of destruction, and that was with the invasion of the Soviet Union that Hitler launched. And as Fred pointed out, 1.5 million people were killed this way, where these were units, machine gun units that followed the regular army, and as they pacified an area, they would simply rout out the Jews, take them to a ravine, a forest, someplace, and simply mow them down. I read students I don't go into a lot of the graphic stuff. I read students one excerpt from Nuremberg testimony about one of these scenes, and I've never yet gotten through it without tearing up. The first time it happened to me in class, I was mortified that I had kind of lost it a little bit in front of my students. But I realized, first of all, that I couldn't not, it was so awful, I couldn't stop myself. And then I realized that this was such a dramatic moment that the kids would remember, and that I should not be embarrassed that I lost it in front of my students. So, and this was Nuremberg testimony at the Nuremberg trials after the war. But the Einsatzgruppen and the kids in this, graphic booklet discuss this and are shocked, and the faces that you've portrayed show that. So, but we're already into the war now, and
the Japanese attacked us, and a day later Hitler declares war on us, so that was obviously a strategic mistake on his part, because that meant that the U.S. could eventually invade Europe and free Europe from his bondage. The kids note that at the start of the war, the U.S. only was ranked 17th in armaments, so we were totally not ready.
Unprepared.
Totally unprepared for this. The guy's been doing his thing for 8 years in Europe and playing off the World War I issues, and so we just weren't moving, and things happened so quickly here. We have the attack on Pearl Harbor. We have more of the Nazis moving through Russia, and then we have the Wannsee Conference in 1942, and this is like about 5 weeks after Hitler declares war on us, and the Wannsee Conference was the logistical preparation for the, quote, final solution, where you integrate the entire logistical reality of trains, cities, poison, troops to be integrated.
Let me mention something about this conference, this Wannsee conference. This was a meeting of 15 top Nazis in various departments, and the goal of this meeting was to make sure that they had the implementation set, that everybody knew what their job was, and their job, of course, was how best to kill Jews. And the point I make about this conference is that out of the 15 people who were there, they had written about 38 books, about 7 of them were PhDs. These were educated men whose job it was to commit genocide. And so we raised the question here of just educated men becoming monsters and having no thought about murdering civilians, Jews and so forth, and the kids start this conversation, and this is really something that students really are very, what is the mind of a perpetrator? How can somebody go out, like with these Einsatzgruppen units, how can somebody go out who was an ordinary policeman, not even raised in the Hitler Youth, how he can go out and simply machine gun men, women, children, babies? How does that happen? And of course there's no answer, but to raise this question with young people is very important. And the Wannsee Conference is a suburb of Berlin. Wannsee is a suburb of Berlin. I didn't even know that. I was walking around Berlin and see a sign to Wannsee, and I was really shocked.
Your knees went,
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's
I
what-
went there, and it's a beautiful, the conference actually was held at a beautiful home of a Jew who lived in this suburb, who was clearly gone. And the contrast between what the conversation was and the elegant surroundings, and they had lunch that was prepared on linen tablecloths with flowers and fine china and silverware and white clothed, butlers and maids and so forth. The contrast between the civilized manner of this luncheon and the barbaric goal of the conversation is stark, and there was a movie that was made on that, so that's part of what I'm
Sure, I'll
trying to
pass
do
this
there
one
too.
around to you guys.
This movie focused on Reinhard Heydrich.
Yeah,
You talk about him in your class?
I can't go into the individuals as such, okay? I do go into Goebbels and the propaganda. I mention a little bit about Goring and so forth, but not, I can't start.
He was Himmler's deputy.
Pardon?
He was Himmler's deputy.
Yeah. Anyway, so,
Moving to the parallel topic that we started referring to before, this page deals with some of the racism in the US that Hitler had used against us as a prop. And there were, we as Pittsburghers should be very proud that the black paper, the Pittsburgh Courier, which was the leading black paper in the country, was a major force for the double V, democracy at home and abroad, the double V for victory. And they wanted victory over the Nazis and victory over prejudice in this country and a reintegration of the armed forces. So this...
and you have the picture here of the black GIs when these 400,000 prisoners of war, German prisoners of war, were brought to this country and some of them brought to the South. They sat in the front of the train car, and the blacks, GIs guarding them, had to sit in the back. And for students, this is absolutely stunning that this happened.
Yeah, we'll pass that one over to this side.
I think we're nearly done with the war.
That's right.
I know from Holland.
This one's,
This actually happened, because he had relatives who were in prison.
this one, I have
Wait a
a,
minute, let's hear
yeah.
what this, what did you say?
So I know from a German friend of mine that this actually
Hold
happened.
up. That, like,
Because
the
he had-
scene.
He had relatives who were in a prison camp in Alabama. And two of them in full uniform were sent to New York City for some conference. And they were escorted by black MPs, who, as long as they were both south of the Mason-Dixon line, the German officers were protecting the black MPs.
It's really shocking.
this page, I'm fond of because I had to research Romanian and Hungarian collaborators, because as you know, as 1944 starts happening and Hitler, well, he didn't know, but the German top corps knew that they were going to lose at this point, because we were going to get, we invaded France and the Russians were mopping up coming in from Russia, but places like Hungary and Romania, they were still collaborating with the Germans, just exterminating people when there was no hope of victory. So this starts getting into that. They start looking at neutral countries like Switzerland, Sweden, and Spain for housing getting some of these people out. And there are, if you do a little homework, there are some incredible stories. And Barbara focuses on Wallenberg, who was a Swedish diplomat, and we'll be getting to Wallenberg in a second. But and the Swiss could bring in a couple tens of thousands of Jews into Switzerland.
I don't wanna, the Swiss were neutral, but they weren't exactly thrilled to have Jews escape there, so I don't wanna give them that much credit. But I do wanna point out that by January of 1944, America had established something known as the War Refugee Board. And this was something that Roosevelt established. It's true, it's late in the war, but better late than never. And that's a real criticism of Roosevelt. Why didn't he do something in 1943? Because by the end of 1942, they had confirmed that Hitler was embarked on the final solution. And by 1943, it's conceivable that we really could have done something, but we didn't. Okay, we didn't, but by 1944, and I'm not going into why it's happened. Then a War Refugee Board was set up, and this was something that, an American effort, humanitarian effort. We were the only nation that did do anything like this, to use every means possible to save Jews, while Hitler, of course, was determined to kill every Jew. So I think the War Refugee Board and the fact that Roosevelt set it up is something that is lost. People don't understand that this happened, but it really was a major effort that was successful. And one of the people who was tapped to help rescue Jews was Raoul Wallenberg. And I don't know if that's a name that some of you know, but Wallenberg was a Swede. He actually was a classmate of Gerald Ford at the University of Michigan. So he was a young man, and when the War Refugee Board approached neutrals to try and do something, Wallenberg volunteered, and he was sent to Hungary, because Hungary was the last remaining place where Jews had not been deported. And there were 800,000 Jews still in 1944 in Hungary. And in March of 1944, the Germans marched in with the express purpose of deporting the Jews. And this is now the story of Elie Wiesel. If any of you who wrote Night and other books, Elie Wiesel, who became a Nobel Prize laureate, his story begins in March of 1944. Wallenberg himself has a fascinating story because he literally rescued tens of thousands of people. He designated tenement houses, told Jews to stay in those tenement houses, and he convinced the Germans that these people are under the protection of the Swedish government, which is neutral, therefore you have to respect them. One of the people who he saved in that tenement was Tom Detry, who came here to Pittsburgh, who was a major force. You either loved him or hated him, and really developed the UPMC. Another person he saved was Tom Lantos, who was a congressman from LA, who made Wallenberg an honorary citizen of the United States. And I'm not going to pull the same thing on you that I pull on my students, but I'm going to ask you, who else is an honorary citizen of the United States? Anybody know?
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. That's one. Go back to the Revolutionary War. Lafayette. Another one from the Revolutionary War.
Kosciuszko?
Who?
Kosciuszko?
No, but there's a bridge,
The
runway
German
in New
guy.
York. He was Polish.
Oh.
Yeah, but the Pulaski Skyway.
Pulaski.
Pulaski. Kosciuszko.
Of course.
Anyway, and there are others.
Kosciuszko survived. That was better than being made an honorary citizen.
So Wallenberg was fascinating. Wallenberg stayed when the Soviets came into finally liberated Hungary. Wallenberg stayed in Hungary. People think he had enough, he was going on with an affair, so he decided to stay. He was arrested by the Soviets as a spy and was never seen again. And apparently years later we discovered that he was imprisoned, and in 1947 died in prison. So fascinating story.
Yeah, this is him, and he's helping these Hungarian Jews who were some of the last people to be moved in Europe to their deaths. And here he is stopping a train. The kids are continuing to talk about people like Wallenberg and their examples, so they're learning from him.
And I just, one of the things I think we do here, we ask the question, what does it take for somebody to be a rescuer? Okay, what is easier to understand? And we have great discussions on this, and the students talk about this. What is easier to understand, the mind of a perpetrator or the mind of a rescuer? And they inevitably come up with the notion that the mind of a rescuer is harder to understand, because a perpetrator, you have mob mentality, you have them in a group, it's hard to say no. But the rescuer did it as an individual, okay? And so after the discussion back and forth, most students agree the mind of the rescuer is harder.
you know, we're heading toward the end here, and the students are getting more and more inspired. But I wanted to have a splash page on the end of the war, and feature Truman's decisions with Japan as well, but also the camps start to be released. And Barbara and I made a decision early on, you know, we wanted the book to get out there, we wanted the book to be purchased by school districts and shared with their top students, and to be an example and an educational resource. So we didn't want, you know, 60% of the book to be prison camp, you know, scenes and dead bodies piled up and stuff. You know, there's a little bit of that as we get to the end, just to touch on the reality of it that Eisenhower wanted to document. Remember? He said, I want everybody photographed. He wanted the citizens to be brought into those camps so they could see it. You know, they might have lived 10 miles away and feigned ignorance of what was going on. But he said, people aren't going to believe it. Got to photograph it, got to witness it. And so we have the camps being released here. And this is important.
I think I want to wrap it up
Okay.
at this time. But the last part of it is really asking students not to be bystanders. You know, what they can do, how they should respond to prejudice, that they should stand up. So we kind of ended with this discussion about, you know, what do you get from this material? What do you get from this whole discussion? And so the kids now are talking about how, you're right, there's a lot for us to think about. One thing I do know, I'm not going to be a bystander. I really think there are things we can do to help make this world a better place. And the young man says, right, we can do things together. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Okay, so we kind of ended on a yes, can do kind of thing, because, again, making history a teachable moment, and using this particular history really to get kids to think about confronting prejudice and intolerance and so forth. So anyway, so that's our thing. We kind of condensed it, but so any questions or anything? Yes, sir.
Are most schools accepting of these books, and have they been used across the United States? How far and wide is this?
I am having, to tell you the truth, it is very hard to get this into the schools because teachers are overwhelmed, and now they're getting very wary of what's happening. You know, you're not supposed to make kids uncomfortable. You're not supposed to, you know, show the dark side of America. And so it's been a struggle to get this into school districts. So if anybody has any contacts, let me know. But we're working on it, and you know, we're just not going to give up with this. But it is something that teachers are overwhelmed and wary of introducing topics that might create opposition and, you know, that kind of thing. You know what's going on in education these days.
We've had a presentation at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. We figured, you know, Barbara and I are here. We're home cooking, you know, at least there's an entree.
You're cooking, I'm not cooking.
And, you know, basically the teachers that are coming to the presentation have a heart for this, definitely. So they're sort of, they're on the ball anyway, and they want to share it with their students, and they're excited by the resource. I will also mention that my brother teaches in Delaware, and he's getting a bunch for his school district. So we're talking about as many places as we can, you know, attract people. But it's
a challenge.
It's a
You
challenge.
gotta keep at it and keep
Yeah.
at it, and neither one of us are full-time marketeurs, salesmen, so it is a problem. If they buy in bulk, the price is cheaper. This is being carried at the U.S. Holocaust Museum, and the Holocaust Museum in New York City. So, you know, we're trying.
Barbara had to drive down to WETA with copies.
Yeah.
So that they would like look at it and put it on the website after the Ken Burns thing came out.
Yeah. that
And
was
we were
the
trying
thing.
for
We're
3 months.
Yeah.
We divided up, okay, Barbara, you take this guy, this girl, you know, at WETA, I'll take Ken Burns and blah, 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 and we, you know, Ken
Yeah,
Burns
Ken
has
Burns did a
copies.
great series, so I try and, you know, look at this and maybe advertise it. It is advertised on the public television
Yeah.
educators resource something, but
Right.
it's hard. It's really hard. And I'm not in an organization, you know, the organizations push their own material, and that's what they're interested in pushing. So, anyway, other
This-
question?
this one-
Yes, yeah.
Are you putting together any kind of teacher's guide or anything?
Yes, we have, I'm working with a high school teacher from Ambridge who's just been terrific, and we've put together a teacher's kind of helping guide.
Did you use any outside advisors with respect to content, or is this something that just the two of you created?
I've been teaching this stuff, so I did send it off to a couple of fellow historians who really liked it, but they're in college and they're not interested in pushing it in high schools. So I know that the material is valid. I know it's kosher.
I'd like to say that when Barbara gave me the script, I mean, eventually, a few months later, I saw a recorded interview with her from years before, and it was like a tape loop. I mean, she had this thing all designed already from her own experiences teaching at Pitt and Carnegie Mellon, and the frustrations of the lack of knowledge of some of the, the students at those higher institutions. And so when she gave me the script, it was like, okay, I mean, it was like a drag racer, how they smoked the tires, and once she got into the script, it was ready to go already. Her brain had been working on this for years.
Well, you're saying about me, but I'm saying about you that, what Fred did, the work that went into it, I had no idea how complicated this was. And that's why I thought this would be an interesting thing. And I don't know whether you can see, I mean, he had big posters too that he would schlep to 61C to show me.
Everybody knows 61C, it's that coffee shop.
Okay.
Okay, that was our
This
home
is
base.
paid political advertisement here, but, so these are small, but he would bring these big poster boards and, gradually fill them in with the conversation and, the speaking, I don't know what you call it, where they speak and so forth. That all has to be worked into the script. And so this was a lesson for me to understand how complicated, I mean, you can, you start.
We're good, we're not on Zoom, but this is even easier. This was my first run through. You can see it's just like stick figures of the faces. Okay, so I had to start planning, how are these people gonna be talking, and then I've got like machine gunners in the next scene. How do I integrate all this? That was a early draft just for me, and then I showed Barbara this. That's my first sketch for the cover. You can see it's not that different from what I eventually decided to do. So, you see things like this in TV scripts and whatnot. And this was my final loose layout. This, you would consider that, I consider this loose. Some people would say, oh, isn't that finished? No, it's a loose layout. So we have, you'll see Xerox pencil sketches of all the scenes. And then the type was dropped in just to give Barbara an idea, okay, this type is gonna work here, here, and here, and it gave her the advantage
and
of.
colors and,
Yeah. She could revise the text mainly for succinctness, so as it moved on, the type wasn't changed that much, it was just edited for succinctness. And then we finally got to this point. This was the last, where I had the final ink drawings all in book form here, so she could see it, as it was gonna come off the printing press. The panels are 140% above the print size, so that's a little nerdy talk here, so that's a typical comic size up. And this, of course, doesn't have all the final colors, but it has some of my initial watercolors, so she could get an idea of what was going on. So this is, I think I gave this to her around middle of June. So we started in February, and so this we'll consider this all layout till June, and then all these finished panels, I took them all down to visit my mom and sister in South Carolina for a week. I started drawing on the kitchen table down there. You know, drawing panels and whatnot.
And I hope you appreciate what he brings, you know, I mean, this is a big deal to carry all this stuff, and.
Oh, it's not. It's fun. And I wanted, just to show the technique, this is, I have my own retail poster line. I do a lot of music images too. And so when I do a big drawing like this, you'll see white spaces. You say, well, Fred, what are you doing with the white spaces? Well, this gets scanned and then I drop in digital color. It's the same kind of thing that I did with the, you know, with this book. It's for areas where I want flat tone to really strike the viewer. You know, I don't want to use watercolors which have ripples and whatnot. So I just brought this to show, okay, this is when I'm done, but I'm really not done, because I'm working on a computer to do the final one. So
I want you to know we've done a presentation to illustrators who were fascinated by this whole thing. So it's not the topic so much, but what he did that they were into. So we were thinking, gee, maybe we could get in front of art teachers to show them this kind of thing and work in the materials through art. But that hasn't happened.
well, next Monday I'm speaking at South Allegheny High School, just on the, one of the teachers who came to our AIU presentation has been sharing copies of the book with some of the people in South Allegheny, and they wanted to talk to me about storytelling as an artist, this kind of thing. And it's, you know, kind of came in late, and I said, okay, I want to get it done in December, so they gave me next Monday. So and it's only an hour, so it's kind of like hit and run, but, you know, I like to inspire younger illustrators, so that's why I'm doing it. And plus, they'll learn about this.
Yes,
Now, was the book published locally?
Franklin Trust Press.
Oh, Gary Friedman, he's a Squirrel Hill
Yeah,
resident.
and he's housing the copies that are in storage, thank goodness. Anyway.
They did an amazing job, and I got to compliment their production staff too. They really helped me with the type. They saved me weeks of work, you know, because I was putting in collage text so that when I scanned it, at least I knew where the text was. Barbara could read the various iterations and know what was going to be in the final thing. But then at the 11th hour, Jeff Mollison said, you know, I can drop that type and just send me what the digital file for the type is. So he went through and just plunked it down as a separate black plate. So it's super clean. If you know, look at the book, it's like, you know, very readable. Nothing gets screened. You know, it's like a hard thing.
So the good news is that they were great in publishing it. The bad news is that they don't market, okay, and they don't have outlets and distribution and so forth. So, you know, that's a problem. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So much fun.